pamphlet here. I have the translated version here that we'll talk about. We'll do about 2 pages today. Every video will do about 2 pages. The title of this pamphlet is called 100 Years Events of Soo Kai Village of the Chu Clan. It's a 100-year history from 1880 to 1980, written by this particular person right here. This pamphlet was actually written in the 1980s by someone whose person's here. Let's call him Mr. Chu. Mr. Chu actually was born in Soo Kai Village in the very early 1900s. He went to the U.S. as an early kid and went back to Soo Kai Village and eventually made the move permanently to the U.S. in the 1920s. However, his family has been to the U.S., his dad has been to the U.S., and his grandpa has been to the U.S. for business. So there has been over 100 years, over 150 years of history of the Chu people from Soo Kai Village going to the U.S. as far back as 1880 or even before 1880. Because he wrote this, he was born in the early 1900s, and his dad and his grandpa, and maybe his great-grandpa also went to the U.S. So that's a little bit of history of Mr. Chu right here. He eventually moved to the U.S., had some kids, and so on. Okay, let's first of all talk about where is Soo Kai Village again. Let's do a quick review. Soo Kai Village is located in China here. Here's Japan, here is South Korea, North Korea, here's Taiwan. Let's scroll down here. Here's Vietnam, here's the Philippines. Let's scroll up, zoom in. Here I'm using Baidu. Here's Hong Kong. Okay, so here is Hong Kong. Here is Guangzhou. Here is Canton Province here. Zoom in a little bit more. Here's a Pearl Delta region right here. Here is Zhangmun City, or Gongmun, Xinghui District, Sunwei District. Zoom in. So here's Soo Kai Village, or Cixi Village right here. Let's go back to the pamphlet here. So this pamphlet was distributed in the 1980s to a bunch of people. And so let's review. This book was written in the 1980s, and we're going to read it here today in 2025. So some of the views here, some of the views you may have may be controversial compared to what was actually 1980. So just keep an open mind, open perspective of what this person wrote. Some of it may be political, a little bit politically based, but a lot of it is actually historical. It's very good to know what was someone thinking in the 1880s when hundreds, if not thousands of people immigrated from Soo Kai Village to the U.S. along with a whole bunch of other people. Let's go on. The first couple pages of this pamphlet. 100 Years Events of Soo Kai Village, a village of the Chu Clan, 1880 to 1980. Parts of it has been redacted. So I just put this black box over here. This was translated by someone in August 2017. So roughly 8 years ago, someone translated this from Chinese into English. The English translation may not be exact, and there's some loss of translation due to the loss of Chinese characters. But let's just try to review it as much as possible and keep an open perspective. Okay, this has been prefaced by, I'll read it first in English and I'll try to give some background. According to my fellow villagers from Soo Kai Village who went across seas and oceans to make a living, their objective was to labor for 10 years or more, save some money, then return to the village to enjoy the retirement years. So people from Soo Kai Village went overseas to the U.S., for example, was to work overseas for 10 years and come back to the village. Sometimes that actually happened, but in the case of the person here, it did not happen. He eventually moved to the U.S. permanently. He did go back and forth a few times, however. Now my village is under control by outsiders. They seize all of our farmland, houses, and things of value. If we want to return to our village, we would not have a home to go back to. For the sake of informing the future generations of our own village about the historical event encountered by their ancestors, with my limited ability, I came up with this little pamphlet. I came to the US when I was a child. This person was in his tweens when he went to the US, so pre-teens, and only had a few years of education in China. If some passages are not properly written, please show me the correct way. Respectfully, the person's English name here. So this is the first page here. It says the village is under control by outsiders. We'll explain what outsiders actually mean here in the future pages. The outsider sees the farmland, houses, and things of value. He wants to go back to the village, let's say in 1980s. He will not have a home to go back to because everything has been seized. He wrote this pamphlet to inform the future generations of our village, the future generations of Soo Kai village, about historical events. Okay. When China was under control by the Qing dynasty, there was no industrial development. It was difficult for people to make a decent living. Therefore, there was an absolute need for them to leave the country to find jobs. From my village, there were a small number of people who went to Zhoufu, South China area, and Little Lagon, the Philippines. So let's review. So some people from Soo Kai village went to the South China Sea area, which would be this area here. So maybe some people went to the Vietnam, and some people went to the Philippines right here. Later, at the beginning of Chung Sui, the first part of the 1870s, so there is some terminology here that's no longer used or used in Cantonese speaking, such as Zhoufu, Little Lagon or Saigon, not too sure, Chung Sui. Later at the beginning of the Chung Sui 1870s, the people of the village heard about the gold rush in the United States and called the U.S. the Golden Mountain. Remember, the gold rush took place in the U.S. and San Francisco area in the 1860s. So the first part 1870s when the villagers of Soo Kai village first heard about the gold rush. Because of that, there's more than 100 fellow villagers who sold their farmlands to gather 70 to 80 pounds of silver. Wow, that's a lot of silver. Very, very heavy. Must be very expensive. They first went to Hong Kong. Remember, Hong Kong is here. Here is Hong Kong. So they had to travel by boat from here to Hong Kong. They first went to Hong Kong, bought a couple of changes of clothing, then boarded a sail ship to cross the Pacific eastward. It took 80 to 90 days to reach the United States, so approximately 3 months by ship in the 1870s. I'm sure lots of people died, or lots of people got sick. Once they arrived, they found that people and places were strange, and white Americans were discriminated against them. Worst of all, there was no gold to be found. Really, really sad. Fortunately, there were jobs in clearing wild land and road constructions available, but the wages were only about 50 cents per day. Meals were not served at a definite time, and they had to sleep on a mountainside. Later on, some villagers went to places like Red Hair, i.e. Canada. So I guess Canada was called Red Hair before, maybe because the people in Canada had lots of red hair initially. Big Luzon, i.e. Mexico, or the New Golden Mountain, Australia. So here's all this terminology that was used previously, not currently used now. Like, you don't call Canadians red hair, you don't call Mexico Big Luzon, and you don't call Australia New Golden Mountain. So that's all I'm going to read today for the first 2 pages here, and this subsequent videos will finish the rest of the pages here. But you can see all these interesting terminologies being used, and people had to take 80, 90 days to reach the United States, and they had to gather 70, 80 pounds of silver to go to the US to find gold, but there's no gold to be found. But said they had to clear lands and mountains to make 50 cents per day. So hopefully you got some new perspective. I'm looking forward to my new video about the next few pages. Thank you. Bye.